So Laura is going to be recording this session and sending you guys all a link to it after, making my life easier. A lot less button pushing before we jump in. It's nice to see you guys. If you can turn on your thumbnails, it's a pleasure to interact with moving live human beings, as we're about to talk about a subject matter that is definitely about alive and moving human beings. So thanks for doing that. It seems like there's still some people coming in, so maybe give me a moment to let them in, and then we can get started. I'm very glad to see you all today. Many new faces for me in this Sangha, and also some familiar ones as well. And yeah, welcome to this introductory talk about Hasta Sāmudrika Shastra, the fascinating ancient Indian science of hand analysis. And we come together today sharing a love and curiosity for the profound and mysterious vidya of Jyotiṣa, and are here to explore, well, what is Hasta Sāmudrika Shastra, the sister science of Jyotiṣa, this precious ally to the wonderful world of Indian astrology, born of the same tradition, and so deeply complementary that in India, when one mentions that one is a student or a practitioner of Jyotiṣa, what is the first thing that people do? Show you their hand. I've seen this happen also in Thailand and some other Southeast Asian countries. Oh, you study astrology. It's an instinctual reaction that is born out of centuries of these sciences being sister sciences and intermingling. So today we will explore a little bit of what exactly Hasta Sāmudrika is, how and why the hand becomes a powerful tool for understanding and discovery, and how to make the most of this mutually beneficial and enriching potent synergy, we could call it, between Hasta and Jyotiṣa. And we will also have some time for you guys to ask questions. I know you come in here with curiosities, maybe some experience, maybe not, and the topic. And to that end, I'm going to ask you to hold on to your questions until the Q&A period that I will set up for us to discuss towards the end of the presentation. But before we delve in and before we do our mantra, a few words as to why I'm here and why we're doing this right now. In 2003, and I realized that actually it was in January of 2003, so that makes next month my 20-year anniversary, I took my first course of many with renowned Jyotishi and skillful teacher Hart Defoe. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. He was teaching in San Rafael, which was nearby. And I'd heard about him and I decided to study. And the first course that was available that he was teaching after I'd heard about Hart was a Hasta Sāmudrika class. So I jumped in. And the teachings spoke to me so deeply, and the teacher, of course, and the lineage that we're all part of, that that turned out to be the first of many classes that I took with Hart. I took all his classes after that for the next decade or more that he taught. While I dipped my toes first into the transforming and refreshing, sparkling emerald waters of Hasta Sāmudrika, of course, the next decades at this point, constituted a whirlwind exploration of all these interconnected and mutually supportive teachings of the old world sciences of Jyotiṣa, Vastu, which is the Indian equivalent to feng shui. It's a terrible way to name it, but that helps us upon first impact for people. Mantra, yantra, tantra, and of course, Jyotiṣa, and so forth. So I continue to be an eternal student very much in these subjects. And my practice is informed by the continuing explorations in the world of seen and unseen realms of existence. And one day while I was a student of Heartji, which I continue to be, Penny, who you're all familiar with, walked up to me, and who was a gurubai, a fellow student of mine in Heart's community. And she approached me in class, and she said, in a Hasta class, and she asked me if I was interested in co-teaching a Hasta Sāmudrika Shastra class with her. And this was a long time ago. And what foresight did she have even then? So we went to Heartji and got his blessing to share this vidya. And he said, yes, but one day you'll be teaching it on your own. But go ahead and do it. And that turned out to be the first of many years of teaching Hasta to all those that have been interested in these subject matters, a lot of time in person in the United States to various communities there. And now, thanks to our ever-changing world habits, for the last couple of years, I've also taken the leap to teach this online. It presents its challenges for me because this is very much an intimate and physical subject matter. And so, I think we make adjustments. Yeah, it takes sometimes a little bit more effort on students' parts to do this all online. But I think that has been possible, seeing of what the experience has been in the last year of teaching also Penny's community. So taught many people the beautiful language of how to learn how to become a student of these subject matters. And I love sharing this material, and I love continuing to grow into it, which I do every day. Beyond teaching, I also do some extra other teaching of classes, content classes in this Sangha. And I'm practicing Jyotiṣa. And I bring this material into the readings that I do every day. I wouldn't look at a chart without looking at a hand at this point. Yeah. And I am continuously surprised and enchanted and marveled by the students of this particular community and Sangha, about your commitment and your dedication. And there's nothing more precious than that. So it's really, truly been a pleasure to share this material over the last year. As we will explore, Hasta is the human embodied and coded form of the same architecture of conditioning, of karma, that we look to the stars and the planets to decipher when we're doing our Jyotiṣa. So for me and for others that have been trained in these traditions, there are sort of two sides to the same coin. So without any further preamble, let's jump into this short magical journey of Hasta together by sharing our mantra. And in the world where I come from, in the teachings with Heart Defoe, the mantra is not just something that the teacher does, it's something that we all do together. So feel free to keep your videos off, your sound off. But if you can, if your local conditions allow for it, let's go ahead and do this all together. Om Ganganapataye Namaha. Om Aim Saraswatya Namaha. Om Namo Panchanguli Mahadevya Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu, Sahana Bhunaktu, Sahaveryang Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Spirit protect us both. May it indeed nourish both of us. Together, may we attain ability to understand what we study. May our study be brilliant. May we agree with one another and not speak ill of each other. Om, peace, peace, peace unto all the sources of karma. We begin, as we often, I would say almost always begin in these subject matters, by acknowledging source. And source in this particular subject matter includes Panchanguli, Shri Panchanguli Devi. Shri Panchanguli is a lesser known deity of the Hindu pantheon, and is considered one of the main deities for Hasta and Jyotiṣa. We could say that, because in the Indian tradition, some deities sort of come in and out of style. It's a deity that is lesser known nowadays, that used to be more known in the past. She's said to be a swarup, a form of Mother Goddess Durga. And Panchanguli literally means pancha, which means 5, and anguli, which means fingers. And she's considered one of the main deities around Kala Jnana, the one who can help us know and help one know about time. And it is said that through her sadhana, a person can learn to explore time, explore the past, the present, and the future. As a side story, there's a famous Victorian palmist called Cairo. Has anyone heard about Cairo before? Cheiro. And he has an interesting autobiography that I read years ago. And in his autobiography, at some point, he sort of falls off the map, and we don't hear talk about him for a couple of years, in the sense that he grew up in a family in Ireland, I believe, and one day was in Dublin, and his mom was this explorer of metaphysical realms. And so he knew all these things around numbers and numerology and some esoteric subject matters. And then one day he was bored in Dublin, and he embarked upon a ship that was heading to Mumbai. And the story is that he traded knowledge of his prowess with numbers with the ship captain for passage. And he arrives in Mumbai, and then we don't know anything about Cairo anymore for a couple of years. And we hear about him again when he has reemerged in Europe and has become a famous reader of hands, a hand analyzer, to the likes of Rasputin and the Tsarina of Russia, and all sorts of people that have gone down in history around sort of culture and entertainment and politics of that historical period. But it is said that in his time, the gossip goes that in his time that he was in India, he met some pundits, and he was introduced to goddess Panchanguli, and that he did her sadhana to completion. And that's what helped him form his clairvoyancy and his deep knowledge about the subject matter. Of course, an introduction to the subject matter would not be complete for me without a heartfelt thanks and moment of gratitude towards those that have made this journey possible, which is my teachers, pictured here at some moment of their lives. This journey has been made possible by the extreme fortune of meeting and studying with the venerable Hart Defoe, and the lineage that flows through him, thanks in large part to his teacher also, K.L. Mantri, a man called by many a living rishi while he was still living. And they have planted the seeds in this field of consciousness. They have taught me not only a bunch of facts, but also how to begin to weave those facts into supporting the human condition, which is basically what we're here to do, right? For ourselves and for others. So we thank those in our lives without which this would not be possible. And may they shine the light on our studies and our session today, and hold our hand into our future together in Hasta, if there is to be one. Since the beginning of time, human beings have asked themselves some basic questions about their existence, about this precious human birth. Why are we here? Is there meaning to our lives? What are we? Is there an order, a pattern to our lives that allows us to live in the most meaningful, balanced, supportive way possible? both to ourselves and to our loved ones and to the others that we meet? Why do we act the way that we do, for better or worse? How can we align with a greater purpose so our lives become supportive to ourselves and to others? What are the unseen forces that influence our lives? And so on and so forth. And these questions have prompted men and women, human beings, to seek and search for meaning, for ordering principles in our universe, for languages that could reveal that which, that could describe what our lives are, and help describe both that which is manifest and seeable and what is unseen, or what we call adrishta in the tradition, that which is unseen in our lives and informs our lives. As the famous maxim said to be uttered by Socrates goes, the unexamined life is not worth living for a human being. Know thyself, right, becomes an intrinsic current in a life well lived. And in these explorations, human beings realize that there is some sort of a natural order to the universe. Life is dictated by the orchestration of the heavens, of the sun rising and setting, of the moon swelling and waning, of the mysterious yet at times somewhat orderly path throughout the heavens that we are part of here on Earth. And human beings have always sought to become aware of this patterned movement of the cosmos as a reflection of the movements of consciousness that we are, and so that we may find an intimate place in such a vast design that we are part of. And in that search, wise beings have explored inner worlds and outer worlds in this quest for meaning. In these explorations, it becomes apparent that we are living in a world of seen and unseen energies that shape our experience, whether we are aware of them or not. So, for example, a classic example is the force of gravity, right? It's unseen, we don't see it, yet it influences every single object, person, everything on this planet. We hear about it because we were taught about it in school. And it's unseen, it's adrishta, but it influences everything, along with other more subtle or gross forces that affect us all the time, regardless of whether we are aware of them or not. So we exist in a current. This current has influences of us, and out of the ancient classical traditions of this world, in this case, specifically out of the traditions of the Indian subcontinent, have emerged divination sciences, the exploration of these patterns of the universe to reveal the connection and the correlation between all things. Languages that help us discover the architecture of our conditioning, the architecture of karma, the architecture of manifestation through matter, and therefore of consciousness through the bodies. To divination is literally etymologically related to divine, of the gods, of the devas. So what is this language of manifestation of life through our world and through our bodies? Well, in the explorations in inner and outer worlds, it became apparent how our destiny is crafted by threads of unseen influences, and that these influences operate on various levels. One simplistic sort of approach to this that we'll look at today is that we could say that there's three main branches to divination, or what we call nimitta. One branch is that of sky luck. And by luck, we mean forces that influence our destiny. Luck is synonymous with destiny, which is synonymous with a word that I've used tonight and that you guys might be familiar with, which is adrishta, that which is unseen and permeates everything. So we have sky luck or heaven luck, the celestial portion, the sky, the astrology. We're all born and we all exist in a cosmic structure called the heavens, the skies. All countries and all cultures throughout time have some form of heaven luck and ways to figure out heaven luck. And for the purposes of our studies, this is where Jyotiṣa resides, right? We're literally exploring heaven luck, sky luck. Then there is earth luck, the terrestrial portion, Vastu, Feng Shui, geomancy in a European culture that has been displaced with a new European culture, and so on and so forth. So there's heaven luck and there's earth luck. And, all countries have a way to measure these. And of course, when I say all, that is, I'm resorting to a generality just to make a point. But many ancient classical cultures of note had some equivalent to some form of astrology and some form of Vastu. And in between, touching the heavens and touching the earth, stood people. So where heaven meets earth is in people, in human beings, in our awareness. Where heaven meets earth is in us, in our awareness. So between these two, we have what we call people luck. Because at the end of the day, it's in our awareness where we connect things. And the exploration of people luck became the exploration of the bodies of living creatures in many traditions. So that is what is known in the Indian tradition as Sāmudrika Shastra, the lore of body reading. Heaven luck expresses itself through the characteristics of the person, of the human being. And this is called Sāmudrika Shastra in India. Now, Sāmudrika is a noun. It means belonging or relating to the sea, relating to the marks on the body, relating to good or bad fortune. And Shastra means a bundle of precepts, a bundle of procedures, we could say. So Sāmudrika Shastra is the art of reading the body as a whole that includes the hand, as we'll see, and we'll see why the hand is so notable in a moment, but also the body as a whole. So this is part of a larger body of knowledge that includes reading the sheen or luster of the person, reading the face of a person, what we call mukhya, Sāmudrika, and any special characteristics of a person, including the gait, how the person moves through the world, their gati, for those that have studied gati, a person's moles, hair, the pulse, we could say, that a skilled Ayurveda Vaidya checks into to feel into how the health is moving through that particular form, and so on. So this is the reading of the body as a whole. Now, hasta means the hand. And for reasons we'll see in a moment, I'll tell you why scientifically too, but the ancients knew this before science came around. But the hand is the quintessential and most complete mirroring of karma to be found on the human body. So the hand becomes, Hasta Sāmudrika becomes a part of the way to understand the whole, the ancient precepts for understanding the ocean of the marks on the human body through the hand, which imply good or bad fortune, and various other things that we'll look at in a moment. So Hasta Sāmudrika is a subset of Hasta Sāmudrika Shastra. Now, Hasta Sāmudrika Shastra is born out of the Vedic traditions, verdant, nutrient, soil. And of course, is being born of the Vedic Sampradaya is a sacred tradition. And, there's lots of material out there that you might find around sort of palmistry and Victorian palmistry and Indian palmistry. And part of our explorations will be around how to tease through these different traditions, because to a certain extent, while when we study Jyotiṣa, we know the differences between Jyotiṣa and Western astrology, and they remain kind of separate disciplines to a greater degree. There are crossovers we will find between Western palmistry and Hasta Sāmudrika. Even though the experience is that because Hasta Sāmudrika is deeply rooted in the ground of the Vedic Sampradaya, it's going to be in my opinion, a much more sort of complete science, because we'll be able to trace down certain things to Vastu, trace things back to Jyotiṣa and astrology, and so on. So, nowadays we could say that body language rides a wave of popularity, right? We see it on American TV series where millions watch Lie to Me. Have you guys ever seen that TV series with Cal Lightman? Who's said to be the world's leading expert on detecting liars through the unique means of examining people's fleeting facial expressions and other shifting body details of their body language. 2 books on body languages, filling bookstores for those that still visit brick and mortar bookstores. To, ex-FBI agent, lie detection experts, writing all sorts of books around how to see if somebody is lying, or gestures you can use for power in a presentation, and so on and so forth. But the idea is that the same behind Hasta Sāmudrika, in the sense that positions of the body in social meetings, or gestures of the limbs, or particular facial expressions can become means for decoding and understanding messages in the person who is emitting those messages. So Hasta is a means to access the karmic blueprint of the person. It is considered a darpana, a mirror. Are you guys familiar with the Sanskrit word darpana? Darpana means mirror. And Jyotiṣa is a darpana. Hasta Sāmudrika is a darpana. There's various other sort of sanctioned darpanas in the tradition that we won't get into right now. But the idea is something that reflects our nature, something that reflects our fate, something that enables us to access that which is adrishta and unseen. I like how Penny uses the metaphor of the backpack, right? We all come into this life with a backpack, and that backpack contains certain things. And that's why we look at the chart and we look at the hands, because that enables us to get an idea of what's in the backpack, so we may carry that load better in life and maximize our potentials with what we have, and learn to accept at times that which we can't change. So as I mentioned before, faces can be read as well. But the tradition places extra emphasis on the hand more than the human face. What do you guys think? Think about it for the moment. Well, because the human face can be taught how to lie a lot more than the human hand, right? Think about actors. Even we could think about, nowadays, social media influencers, where the face isn't quite even exactly what, we thought that they were, and so on. So it's all about the human hand. Now, why the hand? This is a relatively modern scientific corroboration of why the hand. And it's these images are showing the same thing in 2 different ways, which is the results of a experiment that a particular American-Canadian neuroscientist called Wilder Penfield did in the past century. And what he did is that he electrically stimulated and mapped, by way of that electrical stimulation, the sensory and motor cortices of the brain. So both where we receive information, where information goes out. And he showed their connection to the various limbs and organs of the body. So this image shows the results of those investigations, and it shows how much of our cerebral cortex is allocated to the functions of certain areas of the body. It's basically showing how much of our brain is dedicated to those areas of the body. So yes, the face, definitely for very survival motives, has a lot of our brain allocated to it. But look at the hands. Huge amount of cerebral cortex allocated to the hands. Definitely a lot more than biceps. Even though biceps are very familiar in some gym going circles. The hand, modern science supports, which the sages of the past have always known, that relative to the other body parts, the hand has the greatest area of cerebral cortex devoted to it. That means that more than any other body part, the hand and its function is closely related to how we operate in the world and how our brain works. There are additional reasons, of course, why the hand is so important and why the hand becomes so important for us as Jyotishis. Again, a unique trait of Sāmudrika Shastra is its symbiotic link to Jyotiṣa Shastra. When we look at Shastras, treatises of Jyotiṣa, describe certain elements of Jyotiṣa, sometimes they will bring in certain features of Hasta or Sāmudrika in general. Right? We look at Shastra for the definitions of the Pancha Mahapurush yogas, and they'll be talking about the person's booming voice, or, there's interconnections both ways. And true practitioners of Hasta revel in Jyotiṣa, and true practitioners of Jyotiṣa revel in Hasta. They're interconnected. So why the hand for us, and why potentially study the hand? Well, not everybody has a birth time, but most people have a hand. So often, the hand can function, even what I was saying before, when you're in India and somebody just proffers their hand to you when they see that you study Jyotish, and what are you gonna do? No, I gotta run home and I gotta get your birth date and I'm gonna enter it into my computer, and then maybe we can make an appointment next week to talk. So, which is, what a lot of us end up doing. And at the same time, Hasta is immediate. It's right there. It's literally at the tips of your fingers. Hasta Sāmudrika and studying Hasta Sāmudrika is a way to literally enrich your Jyotish. The hand will become, after you have mastered some of the basics of this language of interpretation, an additional tool to create confluence or to sort through contrast in reading a Jyotishical chart. Again, sometimes you don't have access to a chart. Sometimes it just becomes something that enriches your Jyotisha. Sometimes there's certain things in Hasta Sāmudrika, and I think that the people that are here in this room that have studied some Hasta Sāmudrika, you can nod if this is true for you. There are certain things that are easier seen from the hand that even a well-trained Jyotishi is going to be hard-pressed to discern from the chart itself. For example, I'll give you an example of something that is simple. We could even say silly, but definitely straightforward. How the person holds their hand can be an indicator of the amount of extroversion or introversion in the person. A person that puts their hand down like this for a handprint is going to be a lot more extroverted than a person that puts their hand down like this for a handprint. So, and I would say that, for example, in a Jyotish chart, it's a lot more complicated to assess extroversion and introversion, right? Would you Jyotishi sharks in the room agree? Yes, we could say maybe a Saturn ruled Lagna, Capricorn, Aquarius, I don't know, but Venus and Mercury. I would say that there is actually something that is not quite as easy to glean from the astrology chart as from the hand. So there's going to be a variety of things like that that are going to complement your Jyotish that are easier to see from the hand. There's also something about Hasta Sāmudrika that is deeply intuitive that people enjoy working with over time. Most of the categories that we'll learn, yes, as everything that we learn requires some study, but also kind of makes sense. It's like learning a language of something that you sort of remember. Okay. Oh yeah, that's extroversion. This is introversion. That makes sense. It's intuitive. It's also, dare I say, something that's at times kind of fun, although we don't do this for fun. We can at times bring things to bear in a way that supports us and our loved ones in a way that's kind of interesting. There's something also sort of intimate and personal. And, I know we live in a post-pandemic world where intimate and personal almost brings up the heebie-jeebies in some of us. But, we're deeply interconnected human beings. And there's something about being able to point things out in a person's hand, which is really powerful. And I would say that people probably remember more what you're able to skillfully, without terrorizing them, point out in the hand than, some combination in a chart that is just for them, if they're new to these subject matters, just, lines on a piece of paper. So, and this is also a tool for compassion. Again, just like Jyotiṣa, we realize, same 12 rashis, same navagrahas, infinite manifestation, same 2 hands, same 5 fingers for the most part, and infinite manifestation of patterns. So it's a tool to be able to sort of learn, experience compassion for others. And also, it means you will never be bored again, because there's always hands to explore around you. Sometimes we don't have the chart, but, that flash frozen frame of that movie that you're watching, standing in the 7 a.m. rush hour metro in a city as you're going to work in the morning, everybody busy thumbing away on their devices. The world is alive, and Hasta Sāmudrika is one of the ways in which we start tuning in to that aliveness of the world. It's speaking to us in everything and through everything. And this is about the language of the hands. So we're almost there, and I'll take some questions. Obviously, this is a tool for confluence. I don't look at a person's chart without looking at their hands. Just like a Vaidya would not just look at a chart of a person without looking at their tongue, checking their pulse, looking at how they walk into a room, looking into their eyes, the luster of their skin, and so on, and so the sound of their voice, and so on. And remember, one of the things that we try to do in Jyotiṣa is to triangulate. Right? Our teachers taught us to triangulate, to find at least 3 factors that point in the direction of a particular pattern, the particular behavior, a particular vāsana that we may find in a Jyotishical chart, to then really start to be able to say, yeah, this vāsana looks like it's so present in this person's life. I think I can talk to them about their extroversion or introversion or whatever that pattern is. And Hasta becomes a tool to accomplish that, to explore and discern these patterns. It builds onto Jyotiṣa. For example, if we find a passion combination in a chart, and then we find a particular passionate formation of the heart line on the hand, or a particularly formed girdle of Venus on the hand, then we're in a position to be able to better advise and support the other person, right? And see how that passion may be expressing in their lives, and so on. So never look at a chart without looking at a hand. For example, same chart with this hand here is going to mean a world of difference to me than this chart with this particular hand. Hands are a mirror. They encode destiny patterns. And so I'm sure for some of you that have studied some Hasta here, right? This is a completely different ball game when we're looking at this kind of a hand than the hand that was. It's going to yield completely different interpretation of some of the same principles of Jyotiṣa based on the confirmation and the confluence or contrast that we're getting in the hand. Now, what is it that we study when we study palmistry? Because we tend to have certain culturally inspired ideas of what hand reading is. And it's about the signs and the markings and the lines and so on. But, what is it that we actually study when we study the hand? We study the hand as a whole at first, which is a coming together of, we study the hand from the wrist to the fingertips, which is a coming together of the palm and the fingers. And of course, the fingers, there's lots going on in the fingers, including the what we call the parvas in Sanskrit, or the phalanges of the fingers. And we study the palm in terms of all its mounts and valleys, what we call sthanas in Sanskrit. So the entire palm of the hand is going to be divided into different areas that are going to have a Jyotiṣical equivalent that we're going to use for various meanings of the lines and what we find on the hand, and also to enhance our Jyotish. And of course, then we also look at the lines, but the approach is going to be one from the outside in a certain sense. What is the whole hand telling me? What is the palm telling me? What are the fingers telling me? Then we explore the fingers one by one in terms of their importance, starting with the wonder of the human thumb. And then we move on to lines. And of course, there's primary lines and secondary lines. And then we eventually move on to different small markings. So this is just to give you an idea of sort of the general direction of the techniques that we want to learn and explore hands through. Now, lots of things that come up that I want to share with you guys, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. One of the interesting things about hands for me is that they change. And so we have the interplay between the left and the right hand, and we explore what those two different hands kind of indicate and mean. And also some lines and certain things can change in the matter of months. Some lines can change in the matter of years. And so the hands, some things can change in the matter of days. Color, temperature, splotchiness of congestion, so on and so forth. So the hand literally becomes a mirror, as we were saying before, also for us, for those of you that have grown up in a classical Indian family. Perhaps as a child, you were taught a particular chant that you would do in the mornings while looking at your hands. Has that been the experience of anybody here? Some of you are smiling and nodding, and yes, there's a whole short series of beautiful chants that one does before exiting one's bed in the morning. And one of them has to do with our hands and how the hands hold different deities, and the base of the hand, the middle of the hand, and the fingertips, and also about how the hands reflect our destiny. And literally, pun intended, that our destiny is in our hands. So we are also able to learn how to use the hand as a reflection, as a mirror of the choices that we're making in our lives and how those are reflected. To a certain extent in Jyotiṣa, we have that in terms of dasha bhuktis, right? Different prarabdha karma that fructifies at different portions of a person's life, and the interplay of that dynamic element with gochara or transits. But also the hand becomes, well, what choices has the person made in their life? And how is that reflected in the hands? So for those that are interested in being all they can be, this objective knowledge of some of the changes that happen in the hands can be precious and exciting. It shows how on some level we are indeed sort of masters of our own destiny, and we can take responsibility for our lives and maximize our choices based on the free will that we have to invite greater freedom into our lives. Cute image of Edith Piaf. You guys familiar with Edith Piaf? French singer. La 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 vie en rose. Reading Django Reinhardt's hand. And yeah, I'm not sure how that crept into the presentation, but maybe it was just for a musical interlude. We're going to learn how to work through a basic procedure for analyzing the hand that is going to start with how to assess the predominant element type. There are earth hands, there are water hands, there are fire hands. There are air hands and what that means and how to discern them. And then, of course, basic categories of interpretation. Is the palm rectangular, square? Is the hand flexible? What is the skin type? Is the hand warm or cold? What's the consistency of the hand? What if it's not flexible at all? What if it's too flexible? What if the skin is rough? These are some basic categories of interpretation. Then we add the fingers, and we study the fingers as a set at first. How are the fingers held? We spoke about that briefly. How are they set onto the palm? Are they flexible? What are the different types of fingertips? What are the different types of fingerprints? I find fingerprints particularly fascinating. In the study of Hasta Sāmudrika, there's something so sort of primal. Fingerprints are set around the 4th to the 5th month of gestation, and at a time in which the structure of the major organs is still being formed in the body. And so there's something that sort of goes back. And of course, we know they're used as a biometric in the world, because they're, even when they look like they're same, they're fine minutia that makes them completely different one from another. And there's different types of fingerprints, and we learn to explore that. And then, of course, we learn about the lifeline, the headline, and the heart line, and the major and the minor lines of the hand. And then we move on to certain capillary ridge patterns, which are patterns just like the fingerprints, like the loops and the whorls and the arches that can happen on the fingerprints, but that sometimes happen on the surface of the palm, and the specific meanings associated with those. And moving on to markings. Hand's really about sort of assessing what is the fundamental approach to life and the basic drives of a person. How can we understand the character of a person from the shape of the hand and other general categories? How can we understand what their personal approach and basic motivation is? Are they big picture oriented? Are they detail oriented? Are they security conscious? Are they a risk taker? And so on. And, I like this image here of the wheel, because nothing that we will explore, nothing that we learn in the hand is necessarily good or bad, and we're going to want to learn about the different categories that we learn, in the sense of, well, how can I understand the basic hub of the category? Because the spokes of the wheel are going to be innumerable in the world of Maya Shakti, of the proliferation of variety in matter and manifestation. But we want to understand the core of these basic categories, so then we can put them together in the different hands that we go on to encounter in our studies. So 2 hands, 5 fingers, infinite number of manifestation of how human beings express, right? Even if they look alike. So I think this would be a good time to open it up to questions, comments. I'm curious if any of you have a background in any Hasta Sāmudrika or Western palmistry, and any questions that come to mind. I'm here for that. Feel free to raise your hand. Maybe that's the way we seem to do this. Anangalata.
Is insecure to raise my palm given the topic of the class. I was wondering, thank you so much for such a thorough and contextual understanding of this beautiful sister science. I'm wondering, to bring it on a practical level, the sort of time commitment with homework and if there's digestions and just things like this. I think it's a weekly meeting for 8 weeks, but just kind of getting an understanding of what that would look like on our ends as students.
Yeah, and that's important. And I learned a lot about that by teaching this to this Sangha over the last year. First of all, just because you sort of mentioned that, the hand raising, it's an interesting one, right? And actually in many Native American cultures in the United States, this was the way that people greeted each other. Isn't that fascinating? Like, here I am. Nowadays we shake hands, which is another thing that has to do with hands. And, handshakes will never be the same after this course, because now you're like feeling the consistency and the texture and the skin and how flexible and warm, if we still shake hands nowadays, in some places at least. So to go back to the technicalities of this, this is how it's worked so far. This year I taught an 8-class series that became Hasta 1. And then I believe it was 11 classes, Hasta 2 series. The classes are structured in the same way that your classes are structured right now, in which there's a class once a week. There'll probably be a couple, if enough people, if there's enough interest, we'll probably have a couple of sessions that you'll be able to pick from in any given week, one on a weekend and one during the week. And, as all subject matters, it takes some time. So I would say that in the first course, we made it somewhere into a basic introduction of lines and fingers, but we made it through this first category here. And then in our second course together, we made it through these 3, and we still have yet to do markings with the group, which I'm thinking is going to be another 3 or 4 class add-on at some point. So the answer is yes, it's very intuitive, and there's less kind of memorizing of things than in Jyotiṣa at first. And yes, it does also take some time and some commitment. Now, one of the things that's going to be done differently this time that I'm very grateful for is that Laura, who you guys all know, has stepped in to support doing some study groups in between the classes. I think that's going to be something that's going to make the material a lot more digestible and a lot more smooth, and you'll get to have a lot more practice. There's something about Hasta Sāmudrika in which, it's not just seeing whether a moon and a Mars are across from each other in a Chandramangala yoga, but you have to sort of train your manas a little bit at first to recognize certain things and to gain a little bit of confidence in the way that you're assessing your categories. And so I think study groups are going to be a fantastic way to accomplish that. And then, yes, there are Hasta digestions. There's digestions in between the first courses and the second chunk of courses. Usually a couple of months goes by. Probably one will be in the spring, the beginning, and the other one will be in the fall. So we're going to take this over time. And again, is it something that you're going to, put 10 hours into and all of a sudden know how to read hands? No, but it's something that I hope, my aim is that is going to be something sort of a little bit less challenging than, going through 4 basics 4 before you can even just do the basics with. So does that answer your question, Anangalata? I lost you because there you are.
May I recap what I heard on the so far we have like a once a week with probably a study group, and then there's the 8-week for Hasta 1 and 11 weeks for Hasta 2. It's developing, and we get to be a part of that development with the more classes coming. And then could you just clarify again what you were envisioning with the digestion and how that fits in the timeline?
Usually there's not going to be there's going to be homework for sure, but there's not going to be digestion until after the completion of the first 8 classes. And then there'll also be some digestions to digest that material before we jump, for a couple of months. I think what we did this time was maybe there was 1 offered a month or something like that, right, Laura? so we could keep the material fresh before the second course was offered. Again, I don't know how this is going. Depends on how many people jump on board. I don't know exactly how this is going to work out, but patiently and persistently we will get there. But yes, it's a class, and part of it at first as beginners is that you are going to have to learn how to take handprints. You have to print your own hand, and you're invited to start a collection of hands of your loved ones. And so, on that note, I'm going to take the occasion to say that some of you may be getting together with family and friends for the holidays. And that's a wonderful time, especially if you don't see them any other time of the year, to take people's handprints. So if you do think that you want to jump on board with this class in January, definitely let Laura know or let me know, and we will send you the introductory material. There's a video and some instructions on how to take handprints so you can start practicing on your loved ones. On that note, Laura is an amazing hand printer, so you can ask her for some support and advice on that as well. And yes, maybe the first couple of weeks of class, we don't have that much homework, but soon enough, we jump into also some homework during the week in terms of learning to identify the things that we learn into the class handprints. Usually we make a booklet of the class handprints that you guys are going to be sending in. And that's what we're going to be applying some of these general categories to. This is optional, not mandatory. So if you don't want to be included in the class booklet of prints, that's fine as well. Yeah. I hope there's other questions. Tarang, you always have questions for everybody. He must have put us in his background.
Yes.
I know you have questions.
No, that's right, Claudia, but I'm just listening, and I'm looking forward to being on board. So I'm just happy absorbing everything. I know I will be on board. So
excellent. Then you'll ask your questions then. Perfect.
At that time, yeah. I'm already decided.
Thank you for saying hi. Susan.
Yeah, I was wondering, will there be comparisons of the prints to charts of the person? Is that obvious? Is that an obvious question? Or?
No, that's a very good question. So my aim is to, in these classes, is to teach you how to learn Hasta Sāmudrika. So for the purposes of the first 2 courses, I haven't brought a lot of charts in, because you guys would just go on a tangent and go crazy on the charts, because that's what you know what to do. And so we have started to do that in the study groups. I mean, in the digestions. So as of February, for the group that has completed the second level, we're going to have some Hasta and Jyotiṣa charts, 50-50 type digestions. And I would say that I suspect that some of the digestions you might have been going to already have started to bring hands into the mix, right? So this is going to be something that is going to be encouraged for all your digestions, even if it's just 5 minutes at the end for the people that have been studying some Hasta Sāmudrika. But eventually we want to move into the land of looking at the hands and the chart together. But the focus for these classes at first is to learn the categories of hand analysis. Laura, did you have something you wanted to add?
I do, if it's okay.
Yeah, of course.
It's really exciting as a Sangha to be able to start to develop competencies in these complementary sciences, right? So this is a bit of my personal encouragement to each of you. I know that it's incredibly fun and bonding to start to have colleagues to discuss both charts and hands with. So it would be beautiful if you'd consider coming along in that journey with the rest of your classmates.
Do you guys have any questions for Laura about her studies of Hasta in the last year? Or any other questions that come up? This is your chance. You can ask away. Kate.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering how it's balanced with what Penny is teaching and how she's planning her calendar. Maybe that's a question for Penny, but I I've been taking like 3 classes a week for like the last year, and I'm starting to get sort of like overwhelmed and burnout, and like I need to slow down a little bit so that I can like fully digest what I've already learned before like adding on and piling on new material. So I guess that's my personal concern with like taking this next year, is that like I want to be careful with like how much I'm taking on so that I can really absorb it. So I don't know, but maybe, like I said, that's a question for Penny. So
yeah, I think it's also a question for yourself in terms of how much you feel that you can take on. I know that we're planning on, keep developing classes and new content classes also to teach with Penny, and you already have access to a lot of content classes. And so, Laura is actually the one that might be able to shed a little bit more insight on this particular first run of January and February and into March. Maybe.
Yeah, so I mean, it's busy, right? So for those of you who have not yet finished Basics 4, which is many of you, you're in a set frame of content classes. And those content classes are offered frequently. So you have the opportunity to take your content class or to pause on your content class until you feel like you've digested or you're able to catch up. Those of you who are post Basics 4, yeah, this is discernment time for you. And one of the things that I find about Hasta, just personally, is it's nice to have something that it's nice to have a study that is a little bit more intuitive as a complement. So I'm finding my right brain and my left brain are working together a little bit more than with the clog ups that can happen when you're taking too many Jyotiṣa classes. Because Kate, I know where you're coming from. I've been there too, but it is a discernment process that each of us has to make.
And I would add that if you're able to make the study groups, that'll be really helpful too. Just because I think one of the things that happened in my alacrity or overzealousness to get through a bunch of material is that classes ended up being really long. And I hope to not have to do that again. So I hope to be able to keep the classes to an hour and 10, 15 minutes maximum, and not, an hour and 45 minutes each week, which was what it took us to actually sort of get solid on some of the basics. And Kate, feel free to reach out and we can talk about this one-on-one if you want as well. Vinod.
Hi, Claudia. Good to see you again, and thank you for that wonderfully intriguing introduction into Hasta. I had a question. While we've been studying Jyotiṣa with Penny and an opportunity to study before, I did happen to meet a few people who have no idea of their birth time. And in fact, my father and my mother-in-law have no clue of their birth time. They know their date, they know the place, and they have an idea of their nakshatra. Because in India, you tend to at least record that. So do you think that Hasta Sāmudrika could be a good solution for somebody who does not have an idea, and hence quite difficult to be able to get their chart? So this could be probably a segue or a stepping stone into getting into their Vedic chart, or would Hasta Sāmudrika on its own be a good solution?
So yeah, the answer to your question has sort of two parts. One is, in the absence of a chart, we can read the hand. Now, the ideal is if we have both, because that gives a lot more specificity, at least to me as a Jyotishi, that gives a lot more specificity. But have I done just hand readings of folks? Yes, not as thorough as a Jyotiṣa chart reading, but it can be. I know Hart has also done just hand readings as well. The second part to your question is the hand as a tool for rectification. And that is something that is going to require you to get very familiar with the Hasta material. And so that's not going to come on board for quite a while. I know there's some books out there in the Indian literature around, rectifying using the thumb. I need to conduct more studies before, this is something that I could bank on. But I have a lot of hands on a lot of charts. So maybe this is a study that at some point with Laura's impeccable organizational skills, we can start to build a database. And some of the books that I have found in the Indian tradition around this material, are just inscrutable. They just, you read the first page and no matter how many times you want to read them, they just literally make no sense. So I haven't been taught how to rectify directly from using the hand, rectify the chart using the hand, but I know that that is done in a lot of the Hasta traditions. In fact, there's entire sort of naughty schools of Jyotiṣa in which the thumb is used, right, to cast the chart, to find the chart of the person. So it's there. We would have to grow into it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And thank you. And I think I'm definitely on board. Thank you.
And sometimes, I don't know how to quite say this like simply, but I've had times in India where people have, proffered their hand because I knew I was a student of Jyotiṣa, and just so, and even not in India, even in I'm in my partner's parents' little town in south of France right now. And this is a town in which one day they were like, oh, she studies hand reading. And I was like, oh no. And so they offered me up to this gentleman who, came up to me and flashed his hand. And I was like, oh, this is the worst situation possible. But I said like one little thing that hand spoke to me about. And that person, since then, every time I come to town, he gives me bottles of olive oil and he wants to have tea and hang out and talk about his life. And so, I think that's happened to me in India. Little things, we learn how to be skillful and kind with the material. Of course, this is not something we do at a party. This is not party tricks. This is not
no, certainly not. Yeah.
But but still, sometimes little things can go a long way, and people really appreciate that.
Correct. Yeah, it could be a conversation starter and maybe help you build confluence, like you said. Even if you have a 60-minute time window and you want to operate within that 60-minute time window and keep narrowing it down to at least a 10-minute or a 15-minute time window, maybe my question was, would this be a good place to start, at least, if you're completely dealing with an unknown time of birth?
Yeah, I would say, why not? Yeah.
Thank you, Claudia.
Communication is a big dance, but yeah. I know we're a little bit over time. So how about we do this? Let's go ahead and do our mantra together just to wrap things up. And then if anybody wants to stay, if anybody wants to share their inspirations or hesitations or past experience with any of this material, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Rajendra, is there anything you want to share? Why is Rajendra coming? He's already studied this for years.
Well, I'm coming because I just love hearing you present the material, Claudia. So I think the way that you present it is very inspiring, for lack of a better word. So I just like hearing you talk. But in terms of some of the things that have been said, Vinod, your question about birth time, I would say I started studying with Claudia 10 years ago. Not that I've been practicing for that entire time. And the reason why I studied Hasta is because everyone in my family, myself included, doesn't know our birth time. So even though I've been interested in Jyotish, I can't do any of the techniques we're learning with Penny with any of them. But everyone does respect palmistry, and in family settings and family events, everyone does exactly what Claudia says to me when they know that I study these topics. The hand comes out, not the chart. And, just being able to look at the live hands of a lot of my family members and say like one or two things that really resonate with them. Exactly what Claudia said has illuminated a lot of things for people in a very positive way. So it is a tool that I think can be very helpful when you don't have access to all the analytical tools that we're learning with Penny, that can be more intuitive, and very, as Claudia said, like live and in person with people in a way that when you have a chart up, sort of puts a distance between you and the person you're talking to. So there's that connection and personal element that I think is really important.
Thanks, Rajendra. Kate?
Yeah, I just wanted to share on a side note, I guess, you shared that model of like I can't remember, there's a name for that picture that you showed.
The homunculus.
Yes. So I actually, before I got into any of this, including yoga, I learned handwriting analysis, which is like newer, but it's like a guy back in the early 1900s that noticed it was incredibly difficult to change his handwriting and was like, why is that? And he started studying handwriting, and he came up with this whole system based on if he saw it in 100 people, then he decided that's sort of reliable, and it's actually very accountable. So it's just interesting that hands and handwriting, and you can actually change your handwriting and it'll change that trait. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, there's a lot to say on that, just because we have to be careful, sort of when we're studying Jyotiṣa and we're studying Hasta Sāmudrika and we're studying these subject matters, we're in the land of correlation, not causation. And sometimes we tend to forget that, right? So for example, there was a trend a couple of years ago, I don't know if it's still happening, in certain Asian countries where people would surgically alter the lines on their hand to change their destiny pattern. And when these subject matters are deeply understood, that doesn't change your behavior. It's not like the line causes the behavior to be in a particular way, just as it's not that the Jupiter doesn't cause you to be a particular way. Everything that we look at in a chart as well is correlation. There tends to be a high correlation between particular patterns in the sky and certain vāsanās to show up in the life of the person, but not because they're causal.
I didn't mean to imply that it was, but just that if you're aware of this trait or this stroke means this, and I want to change that, you know what I mean? You have to the awareness has to come with it, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, just taking the opportunity to just reinforce that, because we forget about that sometimes, right? We say, oh no, my Rahu, my Saturn. But the magic happens in us. And so I like a beautiful story that Hart used to use sometimes, that the ancient Egyptians would look to the night sky at a particular time of year, and they would see the star Sirius rising at a particular time of day, and that they knew that the Nile would flood soon thereafter. And they were able to use that knowledge to then harness the power of the flooding waters of the Nile to establish one of the first agricultural societies in on our planet. And he'd say it's not that Sirius caused the Nile to flood. Right, that's when we mistake causation. And I think it's important to repeat, just because a lot of people have a fear around astrology that is very based on this fundamental misunderstanding of causation. When we are in the land of metaphysics, of that which is sort of beyond physics, in the land of Jyotiṣa and Hasta, it's correlational. There tends to be a correlation between certain patterns and certain things. There tends to be a correlation between a certain type of line or a particular structure of the hand and certain things. And many of us have the experience of sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't, right? So that's also part of the pattern itself. So anyways, thank you for that opening. Any other thoughts? Or else we will part ways for today. Thank you, Laura, for doing the admin on this class. It was a pleasure to see you guys. I hope we get to meet in class and have a lovely rest of the year. Be well. Happy solstice. Ciao, ciao.
Thank you, Claudia.